today on Ag News Daily.
How can I, as an individual, help guard my herd? And that is through these prevention and through education. Maybe it's a mindset change, right? That would be my wish for tomorrow, is everybody goes to some of these various websites, learn more about the life cycle of the screwworm.
Well, Happy New Year. Welcome back to this weekly edition of the Ag News Daily Show. It is our first one of 2026.
Feels a little weird to be back in the studio, but here we are.
Weird. It's comfortable. We're back home.
Okay.
Kind of. And some of you are also back home from traveling this holiday season, just in time for a couple clipper systems that will bring periodic light snow to northern and eastern parts of the region this weekend, with colder than normal temperatures following along those systems. Early next week, we'll see a brief warm-up that'll be possible before active weather returns midweek, as systems will push through from the west. Another push of Arctic air could arrive around late next week, kicking off a more volatile pattern between January 10th and 15th. In the longer term, the 3-month outlook through March points to a wetter than normal condition, especially in the Ohio Valley, though precipitation could fall as either rain or snow. That is yet to be determined. Winter temperatures are expected to be highly variable, with no strong lean to either being warmer or colder than average. A moderate La Niña is driving sharp regional contrasts, with colder temperatures favored in January and normal precipitation chances. We were just talking about trade shows. Hopefully we get all the weather out of the way before everybody hits the trade show circuit.
It's coming up, Tanner. We'll be hitting a couple of those shows this year. But as we put 2025 in the rearview mirror, for the second time in 2025, the rural Main Street Index rose above growth neutral at the end of the year, signaling modest improvement in the rural economy. The December index came in at 50.1, up sharply from November's 44 index and the highest reading since July. The index is based on a monthly survey of bank CEOs across a 10-state region heavily tied to agriculture and energy both, with 50 marking growth neutral. Creighton University economist Ernie Goss says weak commodity prices and high input costs are still limiting economic activity for grain producers. When asked what policy changes would most help farm income, half of the bankers pointed to reducing farm tariffs and trade restrictions. That report also shows farmland prices moved above growth neutral for just the second time in nearly 2 years, reaching their highest levels since April of 2024, while farm loan delinquencies increased only modestly over the past 6 months. Tanner will have a lot of year-in review in the reports probably on this podcast ahead.
Yeah, absolutely. And we'll be looking forward a lot into 2026. Hearing from the USDA with Ag Secretary Brooke Rollins, she's now wrapped up her first full calendar year of leading the Department of Agriculture. She's outlining the agency's research and development priorities for 2026. In the new year, the new secretary's memorandum released earlier this week, Secretary of Ag Rollins said the USDA will move away from what she calls former President Biden-era initiatives that were focusing on DE&I and environmental justice, pointing out that those efforts diverted resources from the challenges facing farmers and ranchers. Instead, the department will focus on 5 pillars. Those 5 pillars will be boosting farm profitability, expanding markets and new uses for U.S. ag products, protecting agriculture from invasive pests and diseases, and promoting soil health and long-term land productivity while improving human health through precision nutrition and food quality. That felt like more than 5 pillars, but appreciate her efforts. Secretary of Ag Rollins said the goal is to deliver practical research that reduces input costs, increases efficiency, opens new export markets, and strengthens bio-based biofuel demand. However, some questions remain, particularly around her comments on volatility and farm profitability, which has been heightened in recent years by trade disruptions with China and discussions around increased beef imports. Still, the administration says the focus on moving 2026 is improving stability and those long-term profitability figures for U.S. agriculture. So a lot to come from the USDA. Obviously, there is a couple more announcements coming from your story.
Absolutely. Well, as we look at trade ahead, as we mentioned there, that is one of the biggest focuses that bank CEOs are looking at. And the USDA is forecasting a smaller agricultural trade deficit in 2026 than previously expected. According to the agency's latest quarterly trade forecast released on December 23rd, the ag trade deficit is projected to fall from $43 billion in the fiscal year 25 to $37 billion in fiscal year 26. That's a notable improvement from USDA's August outlook, which had pegged this year's deficit at about $41.5 billion. The revised forecast is largely driven by stronger than expected exports, with fiscal year 26 ag exports now projected at $173 billion, up from the earlier estimate of $169 billion. Even with the upward revision, exports would still slip slightly from the $175.6 billion shipped in fiscal year 25, much of this improved outlook tied to stronger demand from China, along with gains expected in South Korea, Japan, Mexico, and Southeast Asia. USDA notes that farm and food exports deliver a strong economic return, with every dollar of ag products exported generating about $2.06 in total U.S. economic activity through transportation, processing, and related jobs.
We've got more updates coming from the USDA. We might as well just start saying they. So they are also rolling out new research priorities for 2026. This focus is on improving that farm profitability and strengthening the climate resilience, as well as advancing the food system. As far as innovation goes, USDA said earlier this week on December 30th that upcoming competitive grants will target soil health, water use efficiency, pest and disease control, and new technologies to help farmers adapt to more extreme weather. The plan also emphasizes nutrition, food safety, and rural economic development. Ag officials are saying that this updated agenda does reflect the pressure from high input costs, volatile markets, and climate-related disruptions that farmers and ranchers are experiencing. Research investments are aimed at delivering practical, science-based tools for producers so that they can use these in the field. The priorities will guide funding through agencies like the National Institute of Food and Ag and the Agricultural Research Service. And farm groups say that the targeted approach is likely to keep U.S. agriculture competitive and sustainable. So more updates to come there.
Continuing along with USDA headlines, they are also facing growing criticism over how it handled the 2025 workforce reductions following President Trump's second-term inauguration. According to Feedstuffs, the department may have lost as many as 21,000 employees through the reduction in force actions, the deferred resignations program, and other departures. A new report released in late December from the USDA's Office of the Inspector General found that between January 12th and June 14th of 2025, the agency lost 20,306 employees, an 18% reduction from its workforce of 110,384 at the start of the year. The impacts varied widely by location, with Rhode Island losing 38% of its USDA workforce, while Kentucky saw the smallest decline at just 12%.
We got a new report that was released late in December that found that the shrinking farm labor supplies are directly driving higher food prices. The analysis that came from Zach Rutledge of Michigan State University shows that the ongoing labor shortage is caused by reduced migration, the aging workforce, and competition from other industries. We are seeing that push up farm wages, which ultimately pushes up production costs, especially for those labor-intensive specialty crops like fruits, nuts, and vegetables. Using an economic modeling approach now, the study estimated that a 10% drop in domestic farm employment leads to nearly a 3% increase in U.S. food prices. This translates to approximately a $3.4 billion added cost to the consumers each year. This report warns that without any policy intervention, labor shortages will continue to erode the U.S. production capacity and will increase the reliance on food imports, raising concerns about supply chain resiliency and national food security. While programs like H2A have expanded, the study says high costs and regulatory hurdles limit the effectiveness. The author concludes that timely labor-focused reforms are critical to stabilizing the farm workforce, protecting domestic specialty crop production, and to help prevent further food price increases for American consumers. I can see why the USDA is putting that as one of their levels of focus for 2026.
Well, as we continue on the 2026 forefront. Since 2020, Agribusiness Global has released an annual outlook highlighting trends expected to shape global agriculture and agribusiness. For the 2026 forecast, the publication says crop input prices are likely to remain flat or even move slightly higher as supplies compete for farmer purchases. The outlook also points to continued economic challenges in China, where excess pesticide manufacturing capacity is squeezing margins worldwide. While that pressure is beneficial for farmers buying inputs, it continues to strain profitability for suppliers. Agribusiness Global expects agro-industry stagflation,
That's a mouthful,
to persist in 2026, with flat global demand across America, Europe, and Asia Pacific. In the U.S., food consumption could ease as obesity drugs gain traction and the Make America Healthy Again initiative expands, while the energy outlook remains favorable outside of the areas affected by political taxes.
Well, the long-awaited Farmer Bridge Assistance Program rates have now been made official, with cotton and rice receiving the highest per-acre support, which was expected. USDA made their announcement of those rates on December 31st, ruling out the $12 billion Farmer Bridge Assistance Program, aimed at helping row crop and oilseed producers that were hurt by those trade disruptions we've been reporting on all throughout 2025. Of the total, $11 billion of that is targeted to row crops. Eligible producers will receive $44.36 an acre on corn, $30.88 on soybeans, $39.35 for wheat, and about $48 per acre on sorghum, and $117.35 for cotton producers per acre, which all of those figures can be found on the USDA's website. An additional $1 billion is set aside for specialty crops such as sugar, or specialty crops and sugar. Through payment timelines for those sectors are still being developed. Ag Secretary Brooke Rollins says that qualifying farmers can expect payments by February 28th. Payments will be based on 2025 planted acres and capped at $155,000 per entity. This will be managed through the FSA and the Commodity Credit Corporation. So finally, some updates on that program.
I'm glad we reported on that. I had not seen that headline yet, but here's another headline. Congressional Republicans say they plan to restart the stalled Farm Bill negotiations starting in January. House Agriculture Committee Chairman G.T. Thompson hopes to move the bill through the committee ahead of a January 30th funding deadline, though he admits attaching it to a must-pass spending legislation could be challenging. The delay means farmers are heading into a third year under the 2018 Farm Bill as they continue to face high input costs, inflation, and trade disruptions. Congress extended the current law through September 30th of 2026. Senate Ag Committee Chairman John Boozman says he remains optimistic progress can be made here in 2026, even in an election year. Boozman notes that some Farm Bill priorities, including updates to outdated loan limits, were left out of the One Big Beautiful Bill Act because they couldn't be handled through reconciliation. He says raising those limits would not be costly, but could provide meaningful help to producers. Boozman also says nutrition programs shouldn't need to be revisited in a Farm Bill 2.0 as lawmakers continue work toward a long-term update. So maybe we'll finally see that here in the year of 2026, Tanner.
We've seen a lot of emails on this next headline. The Federal Communications Commission has blacklisted all new foreign-made drones and components, citing national security risks. What does that mean for producers, especially those using drones for scouting and aerial application? This move places the affected manufacturers on the FCC's covered list, blocking approval to sell new drone models in the U.S. from a rule by the Federal Communications Commission that was made in late December. While the ban does not impact drones already deployed or FCC licensed, it immediately affects the majority of agricultural drones, which are foreign-made. China-based DJI alone controls roughly 90% of the U.S. ag drone market. Farm groups, including the American Soybean Association, are warning that this timing is difficult as farmers face high production costs and rely on drones for precision application of crop protection products and fertilizers. Experts also note that the U.S. domestic drone manufacturing is decades behind, and ramping up production, including batteries and chipsets, will take significant time. In the meantime, reduced supply is expected to drive prices 2 to 3 times higher, according to recent reports that are suggesting this will create additional financial pressure on farmers while American manufacturers are trying to play catch-up. I know from a lot of listeners that are very concerned about that, especially for the wet conditions we had in Iowa last year, to where a ton of fungicide was applied via drone, because that was the only option outside of plane and helicopter.
Yeah, that will be an interesting one to see how that unfoils. The Fertilizer Institute is praising the House of Representatives for passing the Standard Permitting and Expediting Economic Development Act, otherwise known as the SPEED Act.
Easier, yes.
This is bipartisan legislation aimed at modernizing the federal permitting process while maintaining environmental protections. The Institute's president and CEO, Corin Rosenbusch, says the fertilizer production is highly capital intensive and projects often face years of uncertainty due to duplicative reviews, poor conditions, and permitting-related litigation. The bill reforms the National Environmental Policy Act review process, codifying a recent Supreme Court decision that limits environmental reviews to impacts closely tied to the project, helping prevent indefinite delays. The act would also create a more efficient permitting timeline for mines and manufacturing facilities, including phosphate, potash, and nitrogen plants, allowing new domestic capacity to come online even faster. While the bill has passed the House, its future in the Senate remains uncertain as it will need about 60 votes to end debate and advance to a final vote. Tanner, there were a lot of big words in that story. I don't know how I got stuck with that one this week.
Because you are a much better reader than I am. The historic rail merger application's been filed. Union Pacific and Norfolk Southern filed a massive application in late December with the Surface Transportation Board seeking approval of merge. This will create the first transcontinental railroad in U.S. history. Nearly 7,000 pages in the filing outlined the combination, how it would improve the competition and provide public benefits to customers, employees, and communities. This merger agreement, in which Union Pacific would acquire Norfolk Southern, was originally announced in July of 2025. This proposal faces strong opposition from unions representing engineers, track workers, rival carriers, BNSF, and trade groups, citing potential job losses, safety concerns, higher shipping rates, and reduced competition. Feels like the opposite of what they were claiming in their filing. Corey Rosenbusch of the Fertilizer Institute also says the merger could limit options for moving fertilizer, which relies on rail for about 60% of the U.S. shipments. He also emphasized the importance of ensuring ammonia shipments remain viable on rail to avoid costly truck transport. So I'm sure we'll have more to report on that in 2026 as well.
Well, as we look back at some 2025 stories, Tyson Foods announced in late November, of course, last year that they were permanently closing their beef processing plant in Lexington, Nebraska, effective starting January 20th of 2026. The University of Nebraska-Lincoln notes this is the first permanent closure of a major plant by one of the big four meatpacking companies and says it will have a significant economic impact on the state. This closure is projected to cost Nebraska's economy about $3.283 billion annually, including both direct and multiplier effects. Labor income losses are expected to total about $530 million across more than 7,000 supporting jobs, while state tax revenues will also take a hit, with personal income taxes dropping by an estimated $23.2 million, and sales tax revenues declining by roughly $10.2 million per year. So certainly a big hit there for the state of Nebraska.
Yeah, and we're staying on the meats for the next headline. If eating healthier is on your New Year's resolution list, there's something the Midwest farmers might appreciate. A recent Pork Checkoff funded study of older adults found that both lentil-based and lean fresh pork-based diets improved body fat loss, insulin sensitivity, inflammation, and even grip strength. However, pork-centered diet delivered a higher quality protein, scoring better than amino acid digestibility, and participants rated it higher for satisfaction, feeling full, and the willingness to stick with it in the long term. So positive results there for pork producers across the U.S.
Are you a big resolutions guy, Tanner?
Nope.
Okay. Not even going to ask then. Well, as we get into this week's interview, New World Screwworm was making headlines, of course, with the USDA suspending imports of cattle, horses, and bison from Mexico. Then, moving forward to the announcement in May, we saw the detection of New World Screwworm in Mexico, and then we saw sterile flies being developed to help prevent the spread moving further north. To talk more about what New World Screwworm is and other pests threatening the U.S. cattle production herd, here's Dr. M. Wayne Ayers with Elanco, joined by our Michelle Stangler.
Well, there's certainly been no shortage of news when we talk about the beef industry. A lot going on, including so many updates we've shared with you all about New World Screwworm. To talk a little more about it is Dr. M. Wayne Ayers with Elanco. So first, tell us a little bit about you and your veterinarian background.
Yeah, so I'm a veterinarian. Most of my career was in private practice. I taught a little bit at University of Idaho, taught fourth-year vet students production medicine in the field, and came to Elanco 7.5 years ago. Been on the technical consultant team, helping support our products, helping to educate producers, veterinarians about how to use some of those products in disease states and how do we make cattle healthier. So, yeah. Pleasure to be here.
Yeah, thank you so much for coming on. As you look at specifically New World Screwworm, I know we talk about it, it's a flesh-eating pest. What does that mean?
So it's a scary thing because certainly folks your age have never had to deal with it, don't understand it. It sounds scary because we give them these terrible names, flesh-eating just like flesh-eating bacteria, but now we got a flesh-eating maggot. It's like, oh, but it is a fly. And it lays eggs in a wound, and the maggot or the larva from that fly actually consumes live flesh. Whereas some of the other flies that we deal with here in the United States, they only lay eggs on dead flesh or on carrion. So we see those, and we've never experienced this for almost 60 years now. So the last time that the screwworm was endemic in the U.S. was in the 50s and 60s, and we drove it back to the Mexican border. It took about 15 years to do that. We did that with prevention and with the sterile fly protocol. And then it took another 15 years to go from the Mexican border down to Panama to the Darien Strait, where we've been able to hold it there since the mid-'80s, somewhere in there, mid-late '80s. Excuse me. And it slowly started to creep here a few years ago, and then with cattle movement, especially because of the cattle prices we currently have the last few years, there's been this movement. There's been some drought conditions that have occurred in southern Mexico and caused this to come up. So it's I don't think we should be fearful. I think what we need to do is understand the fly, understand what are the risks, with better education, it won't be so scary.
Mm-hmm. And we've certainly mentioned it quite a few times here on the podcast. But from your perspective of what the beef producers that you've heard from, are they talking about it? Are they concerned?
Yeah, it's the buzz, right? I mean, everybody's worried about it, especially when that case that got within 70 miles of the border. So fortunately, that case was a dead end host. The calf was found immediately when it came off the truck. It had an infestation, but it was treated, and none of those, there were no second generation, let's say, because it was treated appropriately. So we're back to the middle of Mexico, central Mexico, and now we have colder weather, so that's in our positive as well. It's probably not a matter of if, but when kind of a thing, and there's a lot of stuff happening in the background. I think that's one thing your viewers probably need to know. I've personally been on what we call the Screwworm Task Force at Elanco for over a year, since a year ago, November, I guess, so currently right about a year, where we have been having conversations internally. We've been having conversations with USDA, EPA, FDA and other pharmaceutical companies are doing the same. Our companion animal side is also working very close with USDA, FDA about what can we do to help or prevent or treat on the dog and cat side. So any mammal is at risk, right? So any wound, including humans. We had that case of the traveler that had from New York, I believe.
Yep.
And so there's a lot happening behind the scenes, and it doesn't get a lot of news. So I'm glad we have an opportunity to kind of talk about it, because people think, oh, nothing's happening, nobody's doing anything. No, there's been a lot of conversations. USDA is going to drive the bus. They're going to work really closely with the other two agencies, regulatory agencies. They're working very close with State Department of Livestock, state veterinary offices on protocols. And so, cattle movement, and how are we going to deal with all these things when the screwworm gets here? They are also pushing and asking for help on some of the emergency use authorizations. So there are products that we maybe have other companies as well that maybe have globally, or and they're not approved here, that we need to look at. We're also looking at some of the products that we have here. Can we use them on an emergency authorization as a preventative, or that's not specifically labeled? There's truly only currently one product that has a screwworm label here in the United States. It happens to be our product, called Catron 4. It's been a long time product used for prevention of larvae, of infestations in a wound. So the other thing that we need to think about, we got all this happening behind the scenes. Mm-hmm. But the other thing that producers need to think about is how some other preventatives. People don't think about hornflies. The bite of a hornfly, that little wound that hornfly makes, is a potential site for a screwworm delayed egg. A tick bite, a deer fly bite, a horsefly bite, those are potential places that female could find and lay her eggs there. If I give an injection, we've all vaccinated our animals, mm-hmm. and there's that little drop of blood that comes back when we pull the needle out. That is a potential site. So we need to think about, in the bigger picture, is like, I need to do good fly control on my cattle or all my livestock and prevent that. I need to do good tick control and make sure we reduce the number of wounds that are potential sites, right? It's not just a scratch on the barbed wire fence. It's all the other things that go along with just living out on a pasture. Other things that we need to think about are ear tags. Ear tags are when we poke a hole in an ear, it's a potential site for a screwworm to lay eggs there. So maybe we spray that ear tag site, right? We also need to think about open castration. Open castration is a potential site for a screwworm. So if we have to open castrate, then we better use a spray as a preventative, something to keep it from getting infested. But maybe we can switch to banding day of birth instead of doing open castration at branding or turnout, right? Mm-hmm. The other thing we need to think about is umbilical sites. We don't usually deal with them unless we're calving or lambing in confinement, and then we're dipping navels with iodine to prevent bacterial infections. But it's also a source for infection of infestation from the New World screwworm. So we need to spray navels. We're going to have to look at cattle more often. We're going to have to take care of these juveniles, these newborns.
So on the health side of things, as you look at a cattle producer, is New World's screwworm top of mind? Is there some other pests that take precedence? Where is that priority of, okay, this might be a real problem?
It's top of mind right now just because of the threat, and it's the threat of unknown, and how far is it going to go, and is everybody ready? I mean, that's why it's on top of mind. But we deal with stuff every day that is, just as much risk, or maybe just as, economically important. Internal parasites, for one. Like I mentioned, the flies and the ticks and lice, they also cause, some economic loss. Bovine respiratory disease. And so, we're very fortunate at Elanco that we have a very broad and robust parasite insecticide portfolio, so we can address all of those external and internal parasites that I talked about. We've also had the good fortune this year of coming up with bringing a brand new antibiotic to the market. And it's labeled for bovine respiratory disease as well as swine respiratory disease. That's called Predilex, first new antibiotic in 12 years, I believe. Wow. So trying to bring new tools for the producers to use to help their animals be healthier increases their bottom line. The other thing that we brought to market this summer is a new vaccine. It's a 5-way viral vaccine combined with that we had as titanium 5, and we've combined it with our Mannheimia bacterial vaccine called Nuplura. We put them together. We call it Nuplura plus 5, and so it will prevent some of the viral causes of pneumonia or contributors of pneumonia, and now the number one bacterial pneumonia of Mannheimia, and we've put those together in a single injection. So now we can help prevent, and then if we do get an escape, we can treat as far as bovine respiratory disease.
Now, you said you were part of a task force that started just over a year ago. If tomorrow, you had a wish list and it could be achieved, what are some things on the wish list, whether it's from the federal government or from some other partners, that would happen tomorrow?
So all I can say is there's a lot of things that are happening behind the scenes. There are a lot of products across the board that are being looked at by the government agencies as emergency use, and they are moving about as fast as we can move. It doesn't seem like it, but they're moving very fast because we have to make sure that they're safe, we have to make sure they're effective, and we have to make sure that their supply. Can we get them here if they're not already here in the U.S.? So from that side, I'm not as concerned about the response that we're getting from the different agencies. We've been working very closely with them, right? Mm-hmm. So, but the one thing that I would say that the producers that need to know is, like we talked about, how can I as an individual help guard my herd? And that is through these prevention and through education. Maybe it's a mindset change, right? That would be my wish for tomorrow, is everybody goes to some of these various websites, learn more about the life cycle of the screwworm, maybe talk to their local veterinarian, talk to Elanco technical consultants. We deal with this. We're in these conversations every day, and maybe we can help with some of those protocols just for prevention.
Now, we've talked a lot about the science. We've talked a lot of great things for producers, but you yourself are one. Tell us a little bit about your background and what got you into, being so passionate about some of these topics.
So yeah, my grandfather had a ranch, and being a veterinarian was a way for me to kind of be in that community, farming, ranching, and I have a passion for trying to help animals be healthier, be better. It's all part of our bigger scheme of we all make some money off of it, by raising these animals. But more importantly, we're feeding the country, we're feeding the globe. So that was my way of contributing. And I had the good fortune to be part of the University of Idaho system for a while and be able to educate some veterinarians that now in my Elanco role I get to run into when I'm traveling and get to see what some of my students have done. And it's very rewarding.
Educational wise, to learn more about some of these things that are happening in the cattle and the pesticides, parasites, whatever it might be, where do you recommend them going?
Yeah, I would direct everybody to go to, as far as to our site, go to elanco.us. And then from there, you'll be able to go through and look at the various products that we have available across the board. If you know who your Elanco rep is, if you don't, you may even talk to your veterinarian, because your veterinarian probably knows who the Elanco rep is, and also the Elanco Technical Consultant Group. We're available for conversations at any time.
Well, thank you so much for joining.
Thank you for having me, Michelle.
I feel like by the time it comes to set New Year's resolutions, it's already the new year, and I missed my opportunity.
Shocker. Mm-hmm.
Just don't get to it. Well, Delaney, after all those USDA-related headlines and other very timely news, what's been happening in the markets?
The markets have been a little weird the last 2 weeks, of course, with some of those holidays being closed. So we've had some seasonal trading here, but livestock futures were again higher to start the session this week as managed money buyers returned to the complex. This came despite the fact that China announced it's going to impose a 55% import tax on beef above its 2.7 million metric ton quota beginning January 1st. That tariff will remain in place for 3 years and is intended to support China's domestic livestock market. Packer coverage remains limited, but some packing plants are expected to close in January. This will increase the availability of fed cattle for the remaining operating plants. On the grain side of things, corn, soybeans, and wheat began the final trading week of the year with moderate losses. As U.S. year-to-date corn exports have reached 1 billion bushels, up 66% from last year, marking the first time exports have topped 1 billion bushels before year-end. Some analysts believe U.S. corn export demand is front-loaded this year, with imports covering needs earlier in the year than usual. For soybeans, China is expected to easily reach its 12 million metric ton import target. According to Target data, shows that China has now purchased about 5.5 million metric tons of U.S. soybeans, and soybean sales to unknown buyers are at 3.1 million metric tons, as analysts suspect that the majority of those, of course, are also going to China. So, Tanner, a year ahead of us with higher input costs, potentially lower commodity prices, but a lot of folks, all in all, are saying this year will likely be a little bit of a rebound year compared to 2025.
It was interesting. On Farm for Profit, we interviewed and got a crop insurance update, and it sounds like that might be the only input that is decreasing in price. So hopefully that might be a good interview for us to get here on Ag News Daily as well. I've always thought it'd be funny to start a new X account and call it unknown buyer. So that way, every time a shipment was credited to the unknown buyer, you make a post and all of a sudden you know who it is.
Well, if only it worked that way. I think X is not allowed in China, so we'd know it.
Oh, that's trouble. That is the trouble. Well, listeners, we're looking forward to 2026. We've got short clips from this episode on all of our social media channels. Check out our YouTube as well. We appreciate you as always. But Delaney, for today, should we let him go?
Let's let him go.